It's hard to believe we're at the end of a semester already. Thanks for tuning in for the first round of Localization Practicum final presentations. Similar to previous years, translation and localization management students have formed small teams of 3 to 5 classmates and partnered with 1 or sometimes more nonprofit organizations to help them reach a global audience. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the TLM students for their hard work in ensuring that their client's message is not lost in translation. Students took on many roles in these projects, from account manager to project manager, vendor manager, engineering, quality assurance, terminologist, dubber, subtitler, and translator, and more. I also really want to thank the volunteer translators from Translation Practicum, the professional translators who volunteered their services, as well as students studying translations at schools in other countries. So let's get started with Lynette, Lucy, Mark, Irvin, and Sophie of Pacific Wave Localization. They're going to present their experience with helping My Green World to spread their message, their mission of engaging and inspiring young global citizens to enhance the efforts of global wildlife and environmental conservation around the globe. All right, so take it away, Pacific Wave.
Hi, everyone. We are here to talk to you about our experience in working with My Green World. So I'd like to tell you a little bit more about My Green World. I know a lot of you are already familiar with the work that they do. They are a social enterprise based in Melbourne, Australia. And the founder, Natalie Kiriakou, was profiled in The Guardian. And I stumbled upon her article because I was doing research for a social entrepreneurship class. So after working with her for that class, I was able to talk to her and see if she potentially had any need for localization in the future. And fortunately, she did. She said they have had recently a lot of queries from Latin America, southern countries in Africa, Southeast Asia, and comments on their website like, why isn't this site translated? Why is this site only in English? Because people really want to focus on the mission of engaging youth and technology to help further conservation for wildlife and the environment. So the organization is looking to expand next year into China, the UK, India, Southeast Asia, and parts of Europe, and we were fortunate to be able to help them achieve that. So a little bit about what we did. When we first started talking to our client, we learned that they had a wish list, and it included getting their main message on their website translated, their mission statement translated, and they also had access to a lot of resources and grants through other work that they had worked on as a social enterprise, such as a grant from Facebook and TransFX. So they were hoping we would be able to leverage those. It was something we explored, and it didn't really make sense for our project, which some of my colleagues will talk about a little bit later. We also had a wish list. In looking at this organization, we saw that they had an app called World of the Wild, which helps directly help nonprofits helping wildlife conservation around the world. And they had some YouTube videos, and we were really excited to jump into this project, and we're like, we're going to localize the website and the app and all these videos. So we wanted to aim high, but ultimately set expectations based on feasibility and scoping. So in the end, we found something in between our wish list and the client's wish list. And what we actually delivered was really exciting for us. We translated the main message, their mission statement, as well as a brand new landing page into these 12 languages. Which was far beyond the original scope of what the client wanted was Spanish, Chinese, and Hindi. So in addition to that, we were really excited to deliver this as well as a sustainable transition plan for our clients so that they can continue translating new material and work with the volunteer translators that we recruited for them. So my colleague Irvin will talk a little bit more about what we did in more detail.
So what we translated? Firstly, our client's mission statement, we think which is a core of an organization. Secondly, our clients want one of their pamphlets. Here is a Bengali version of our translation. Thirdly, the landing page. Actually, we created the English version landing page based on the original stuff and translated it into 12 languages, which can be seen as a small internationalization and localization process. From here, we think we gave My Green World a great start for their future localization process. Here's the landing page we created. And for translation, like Lynette mentioned, we had a wish list from our client and were able to grow it. Our client wanted 3 languages, in Spanish, Chinese, and Hindi, and we managed to grow 9 languages more, like French and Russian. Our client wanted 3 documents to be translated: their mission statement, their pamphlet, and the landing page. For this, we went through translation, edition, and proofreading workflow. We 5 did the proofreading internally, and we wanted to bring a variety of people involved in our project, helping as many people as we could, just like our client was helping us, and vice versa, forming a very helping web. And finally, we decided on 50 linguists. So each of us actually managed a small linguist team, wrote several dozens of emails in average for each of language, which helped us know more the ins and outs of what a project manager's work will be like, which made me never want to be a project manager. Double quotes. And here's our workflow. So where do we find these 50 linguists? It must be prose. We put a call on prose and willed it down after that. We brought in students, professionals, and even someone who had written for National Geographic in the past. Lots of writing, really hard to decide on the right people, but finally we made a decision. And we divided the languages equally between 5 of us. Each of us took 2 or 3 languages. But we also ran into issues posting a job on prose for a non-profit. It's very strict to post a job on prose looking for volunteers. Like here's an email of me communicating with prose staff. Like you can see here, like official representatives' links and email must all be from the organization you post for. I hope that the first year students will watch this presentation. Like both Lynette and I communicated with pros back and forth several times to get this permit. Okay, here's my part. Next, my colleague Mark will tell you more about the interesting stories and more.
Now into translation management. Though we have like 12 languages and like over 48 linguists, but with the scope and the complexity of the content we had, we could have just sent the doc files to our linguists to work on through emails. But for a more centralized translation management, we decided to use a cloud-based tool. We initially thought of TransifX because our client had a grant for a free account for like 6 months. But then we decided it's going to be too much hassle for us to get in and get out, and it would create a problem for the exit plan. Then we heard about SmartCat from other groups, and it turned out to be just the right fit for us. It's got all the functionalities we needed, yet it was easy enough for new users to find their way around, which is important because we did encounter reasonable amount of resistance trying to get our linguists to use a designated tool. Some of them rejected the project just because they don't want to get into too much trouble. And personally, I think I might have lost a few linguists because I sounded like a SmartCat sales guy or something. But all in all, for us, it's a very successful experience managing projects with SmartCat. It's got an excellent PM view. It's easy to onboard linguists. And itself is decent CAT tool with all the needed functions. Linguists can easily leave feedback and queries for us, and they can see the comments from each other, so sometimes they can get the answers they needed before we have to step in. And when for the linguists, most of them agree to use the tool after some evangelization and didn't have much difficulty using it. After completion of the project, we send them a survey for their feedback on using SmartCAD, and you can see that regarding how easy it is to work with SmartCAD, it's all 7, 8, 9, 10 ratings. And regarding the overall experience with SmartCAD, like 72% of them give the high score of 5. And here's a quote from one linguist saying, "It was my first time using it, and it was very easy to use." Then, during the course of the project, we had a few surprises communicating with our linguists. And there were definitely some lessons learned. First of all, because we posted the name of client on the pros ad, so a lot of linguists try to bypass us and get direct in contact with the client. And basically just flooded our client's inbox. And one of them even tried to teach our client a lesson about how nothing comes for free, and if you want the job done right, you better give me all the money you got and let me handle it, which is kind of embarrassing. The second one was that because our project lasted for a few weeks, some linguists just dropped out along the way and stopped responding to emails for various reasons. Some of them, I think a couple of them overlooked the fact it was volunteer work and decided to quit. And some of them got busy with their paid work and stuff. So I guess the lesson here is for volunteer work like this, when you're offered help, you better get as much work done as possible. Otherwise, I guess they're just not as committed when it's free work. And then, when you do such a good PM job like Lucy here did, and you're naturally as naturally charming as she is, your linguist may get out of the way to compliment you. Like this way with his exact words, "Lucy, you are too precious for all of us," which I guess can be interpreted in different ways. But we decided, yeah, it's a love letter.
So I definitely did get a complex after that compliment, and I will be holding on to that for a while from my linguist. So something that was very important to us was thanking our vendors. We worked really hard to get them, but it was even harder for them to work to stay with us. It was, it was a volunteer effort, and we've been through translation. We know how it works, and so for us, we wanted to do everything we could to thank them. The first way we did this was on Pros. So because we got most of our linguists from Pros, it was super quick to give them feedback. The Pros feedback form is super simple. Shout out to them for making the process so easy. They even have a character limit, so you can't ramble on for days about how great they are. Very quick to just kind of do those pretty much all at the same time. We also provided LinkedIn recommendations and a few other personalized recommendations. My favorite part about this was that the translators who had directly emailed our client provided a list of their credentials, and it came in PDFs of their degrees, of their diplomas, of letters of recommendation. And so now it's very cool that because we wrote letters of recommendation, that the Migraine World name and message is going to be spread to other people who are recruiting linguists. So it's kind of like a little internal marketing that's hopefully going to lead maybe to some more people going to Migraine World's site, because we were able to, thank their linguists, and now that our brand is associated with the linguist in question. As far as the vendors' satisfaction of working with us, we had great results. So in the same survey that Mark mentioned about how they felt about SmartCAD, we couldn't resist asking them how they felt about us, love letters aside. And the first, I guess the most important thing for our client is that we have a 100% return rate on people who want to continue volunteering with Migraine World. So this is really good. That means we have a really awesome, strong database to pass over to our client. When it comes to working with their MIS project managers, we had an 80 to 100% success rate in terms of clear and effective communication, as well as responsiveness of their manager. And this is a pretty high number, and we're excited that we can walk away from this project with satisfied linguists, a satisfied client, but also satisfied project managers. Finally, the word great was used back and forth a million times in the feedback from our linguists. We did make part of the written feedback necessary in the survey so that we would have to know, more than numbers, how they really felt. And I don't know if it was the English or the whatever, but great was like a big word. It was a really great process. It was great. I loved it. So I'm not a big fan of the word, but the linguists are. So when it came to the actual translation and finally putting this all together, we decided that we needed to run a beta test because we hadn't used SmartCat before. We needed to onboard as many people as we could, and we were trying to think, do we do this by language? Do we do it by document? And finally we decided we need to jump in and we need to do this. So we jumped in by starting with the mission statement. And this document was chosen because it is a 380 word Word doc. And it's going to stay that way. So it's also an internal document, meaning that while parts of the mission statement will be used for the public, it is more of something that our client just keeps on the inside in case anyone asks for it. So it's a really good testing ground for us to try to figure out like the problems we would run into with SmartCat, if there were any, and there were a few here and there that we could iron out. And the beta test went so well that we decided to continue using SmartCat and all of our linguists for the pamphlet, which Sophie will tell you about.
Oh yeah. Well, for the pamphlet, it's concerning with the DTP project. So for this project, our client has already created their English pamphlet in Lucid Press. Yes, this is the logo of Lucid Press. So we are very lucky to use this tool for making other multilingual pamphlets. Our client just give their user ID and passcode to us. So I really think it's a great substantial trust on us. We had a very good experience over using Lucid Press. It's a paid website dedicated to digital designing and publishing. You can add it directly in Lucid Press, just like in any other office software like Word or PowerPoint, and you can directly download your finished work in PDF. So here is the working interface of Lucid Press and some of DTP jobs we have done. During DTP, we also focused on dealing with different fonts and text expansion for some locale. There is no one-fits-all font, so we need to try one font after another to find the best one. As for the landing page, there is a long story. At the first place, we tried to make a clone of Migrant World website at our local place in order for possible entire website localization and function testing. So we need to export the database of Migrant World website and import it into our own site. Consulted with our professor, I installed a plugin named All-in-One WP Migration, and here it is. For the first try, but the database exporting was very successful. But importing it was a mission impossible because the database was way too big to be imported into our own site. So I tried another two plugins. Here is the export plugins and templates and WP Migrate DB. This time, database exporting was running smoothly. Wow. After database was imported into our new site, it just could not display normally, as you can see. Many web page elements were disappearing, and the layout was rather awkward when comparing with the original one. So later, as we are getting more clear about clients' need, we decided to give up writing a website migration, and focused on language-specific landing pages instead, because we could get their information across, go wide instead of go deep, and we found it's very necessary to add a language menu on web page for users to pick their preferred languages. We tried to create a new landing page in English at the first try, but the formatting was totally wrong. So as Irvin mentioned, we created new landing pages in English, and that was a success. Later, based on that, we created other multilingual landing pages. In this video, you can see precisely how this project runs, how our website looks like, and language menu looks like. We need to create a content for each of the landing pages, so we copied and pasted all translated segments from SmartCat into the WordPress. And next, my colleague Lucy will talk about our exit plan. Thank you.
So this whole thing worked out very well, as you can see, and now it's time for us to turn it over to our client. We maintained our stable database of linguists, like I mentioned beforehand. It's just in a basic Google Sheet that we will be turning over. And we have our 100% retention rate as well, which is very exciting. As far as turning over SmartCat, there are a few steps that we're engaging in. The first is just turning over the Gmail account and everything associated with that, because we didn't want to bombard the client's email inbox, because that kept happening on accident due to our linguists. We decided to create a separate account for SmartCat, a Gmail account for SmartCat, and we'll be turning that over to her, as well as a video tutorial of how to use SmartCat, because we are TLM students, we know how to troubleshoot. Our client is not a TLM student, and so turning over a video tutorial of how to create a basic document in SmartCat and assign linguists is something that's happening as well. And finally, our client will continue to have access to us. Now, just because this semester is coming to an end does not mean that we are stepping away. We are always here to be consulted as our group, Pacific Wave Localization, because we really love doing this project the entire way and want to be able to continue to work on it as much as we can in the future.
And we also wanted to touch a little bit on a common theme that you probably saw throughout the presentation, which is communication. Obviously, there's internal communication, our communication with our vendors and linguists, and communication with our clients. And when it came to team communication, one of the main things that we wanted to focus on was expectation setting and consistency among ourselves. So we established regular check-ins, obviously on Wednesdays, and then we also established check-ins on Mondays to make sure we knew what needed to be done for that week. We worked with various tools. Our main one was Google Drive. We also used WeChat in case of any urgent issues that needed to be resolved sooner than email. And adaptability was probably a big learning that we all had. When we started out, we set out specific roles that each person was going to take on, and maybe by the second week we realized that those were just going to have to change, and we just evolved with everyone's strengths and weaknesses and what people were interested in taking care of, and all took little pieces of the process. We also ended up reducing our frequency of check-ins because we didn't need them once we got rolling, so just really learning to adapt to our process. For our vendor communication, we wanted to make sure we established an end-to-end process for them so they were taken care of from the beginning to the end, including our kickoff and our survey at the end. We also wanted to make sure that we were consistent with them and in our communication, so we all had templates for what we were sending to them, so they were all receiving the same information. And obviously, with troubleshooting, we wanted to make sure our linguists had all the same information, so if we had one issue in one language, we were sure to pass it along to our other linguists. With our client communication, obviously, our client has a different schedule than we do. She may have been our priority, but we probably weren't hers. And so it was really interesting for us because she was busy running this social enterprise, saving all the animals in the environment, to develop solutions on our own and present them to her and get her approval or changes and then move forward with the process. So it was nice to be able to have that independence on our end. In terms of our method, it was primarily email and Google Drive is how we will be delivering our final deliverables and our transition for the exit strategy. And again, we had to adapt. So we've been eating, breathing, sleeping localization for the past 2 years, and she has not. So, while we may want to step in every chance we get and educate her on localization and the process and how to do things, it wasn't really a focus for us during this, but we are including it in our transition plan to make sure that she has all the tools that she needs to continue doing the great work that she's doing. So thank you so much. If you guys want to learn more about My Green World, here's where you can find them online and on social media.
All right, thanks so much, My Green World. Next up, we have Cascadia Loc. Alan, Sam, Jacqueline, Ivy, and Cy will discuss their work this semester for Caravan Studios, an organization dedicated to promoting public welfare through mobile applications. Take it away.
Hi everyone, we are Cascadia Lock and we're going to be speaking about our practicum project that we did with Caravan Studios. First, a quick introduction of our team. Our 2 points of contact at Caravan Studios were 2 wonderful people named Mary and Richard. I was served as the primary account manager, so I would email back and forth with them about every week. And our team, I'm Sam Grebe. Going around the horn, we have Ivy Wang, Alan Massey, Jacqueline Zhang, and Cy Ma. And we also had a number of linguists who helped us out in the project, as none of us speak the languages of the stuff that they needed translated. So for Spanish, we had Arandira helping us out. For Brazilian Portuguese, we had Alexandra Moraes, who's a Miss alum working up in San Francisco. And Valeska and Mariana also helped us out. And for French, we had John and Catherine Rose. So big thanks to all of them for helping us out with the project. A quick introduction of our client. Caravan Studios is a mobile app developer that works on apps that provide public welfare and help out the community. And they're actually part of a larger organization called TechSoup. And some of the apps that they work on, for example, 4 Bells, which is an app that helps organize and deploy volunteers for time-sensitive tasks. The second one, the little white owl, is called Safe Night, and that's a crowdfunding app that allows people who need emergency shelter to find it, and allows donors to provide donations to access that shelter right from their phones. The 2 projects we mainly focused on were the Public Good App House, which is a collection center and an information base for people who want to get involved with developing apps for the community. And Feito na Biblioteca, which is a project based mostly out of Brazil that uses library staff and library users in order to develop apps using open government data in Brazil. So when we got started with the project, we obviously wanted to take on everything that they did. And they wanted to give us everything they possibly could. But obviously that's not realistic, so we had to spend quite a bit of time with them at the beginning, working with them to figure out what was realistically accomplishable in our time frame and with our resources. And so this came in the form of having phone conferences every 2 weeks with the entire team. And in the first call, we went over everything that they needed and tried to figure out what we could reasonably accomplish over the course of the semester. Then we created a statement of work to reflect that and had a second call with them where we went over the statement of work, took any recommendations or comments from them and made adjustments as needed. And then we got everyone to sign off and we got working. And what we came up with as a scope for the project included translation of InDesign marketing materials for the Public Good App House. This project is in its very early stages and they're still trying to collect donors and collaborators to help out with the project. And so they need a translation of their InDesign documents from English into Spanish, French, and Brazilian Portuguese. And a large part of the project actually came in the form of video subtitling and translation. Their Feito na Biblioteca project had a series of 14 interview videos with people who were involved with the project in Brazil. And they needed those videos subtitled and they needed the subtitles translated into English. Another thing what we did for them was they had never used a translation management system before, but were very interested in learning how to use one and implementing one of their own. So they asked us to help them pick one out and learn how to implement it into their translation workflow. And finally, in order for them to be able to make use of all the things that they learned working with us over the course of the semester, including how to use the TMS without our help, they asked us to make a knowledge base so that they could take that with them after the end of the project. Now Cy is going to talk about tool selection.
Thank you, Sam. So for this part, I'm going to talk about how we establish our workflow from scratch and how we choose tools to maximize our productivity. So just like every other startup, email correspondence marks the starting point of our business. We kept running in this minimum state for like 2 weeks, then decided to move onto Slack, the online chat tool, when our statement work was confirmed by our clients and our team got into full swing. By that time, we were realizing that things were escalating quickly, and we need an internal management tool. So that was when Trello came into play, connecting all the dots. So how exactly did we use these tools to help us tackle different tasks? To begin with, our actions were always driven by brainstorms, whether in person or on Slack. Once conclusion was drawn, it will be reflected as a Trello card with a concise action plan and assignees. As you can see here, we have associated each Slack channel with a Trello board. So even as there were several projects going on at the same time, our discussions and timelines would stay well organized. As freemium services, both Slack and Trello have provided us with great flexibility for their non-paying users. They both offer some add-ons that enable integration with other platforms. And here, whenever our team members update a Trello card, a push notification will be generated automatically on Slack. So even as our management architecture was a little complex, we could still make sure that everyone was in a loop. And the best part about this is that the integration was bi-directional. We can also manage Trello cards in Slack. File management was initially a headache for us too. Our clients use Dropbox as their primary cloud storage platform, and for the subtitling project, none of us except Alan could receive the package because it was so big, around 15 gigabytes, and there was no way for us to download it directly. We had thought about moving everything into Google Drive, but later we found out that Trello provided us with connectors that actually could help us attach those shared folders and links with each card. So basically, we're using it as a hub for all the files scattered around Google Drive, OneDrive, and Dropbox, and there are so much more connectors. From my personal experience, the combination of Slack and Trello definitely gave a boost to our work. But what I had in mind was Slack plus Jira. As you know, Jira is the market leader. Even as Jira would only cost us $40 for the span of the project, we certainly didn't want to go that way. What I did was registering a free trial account of Jira and basically try to mimic all the functions on Trello. So both Jira and Trello build upon a core function called Kanban boards. Behind them, the logic would stay the same, except that Trello didn't have all the advanced functions like version control, tracking and reporting, and non-linear workflows. So to implement the similar functions on Trello, I have to isolate all the related events into a different board. And it was named issue tracking. So what did we learn from this experience? Oh, sorry. Well, for the software we selected, there are at least 3 to 5 options for each of them. Sometimes we were just wondering, do we really want to go down the rabbit hole? Are we making simple things complicated? Well, at first you might feel that it was overwhelmed by all these tedious procedures. But later, you might find out that without them, you would got lost in the endless tasks. In hindsight, it would actually work better if we gave our client access to the issue tracking board, since most of the questions came from them. However, it was actually encouraging for us because they were super interested in this TMS. And right from the start, we were realizing that we're not only doing this project alone, we need to help them eyeing for the future. And it starts with the TMS not only working for us, and also for them. So for the next part, Jacqueline is going to elaborate on this pilot project we did for them.
Thank you, Sai. I will talk about TMS selection and vendor management. We know there are many TMS in the market, and we selected our tools based on our needs. As we have no budget for buying licenses or tools, and our client did not provide any tools for us, our priority is to find a free tool. Also, we are a mixed team of PC and Mac users, and since we will not be on campus very often, we preferred cloud-based tools that can work on different platforms. Another factor that we consider about is the ease of use and compatibility. The project that we are doing for our client may be a one-time project, but we are also laying down foundation for their localization work in the long term. Since our client is new to localization, we have to provide necessary education for them, and we want to start with something simple
and to prepare them to switch to new tools in the future. We select our tools based on our file types too. The tool must support our files that we will work with, which are InDesign files and subtitle files. So based on our needs, SmartCat is a perfect match, and it did not disappoint us. Here is an overview of SmartCat. From the left panel, you can see that you can upload your glossaries and TMs, or you can create ones if you want. And on the right panel, the PMs can check the progress of each project. And here is a capture of the translation and editorial view. It is very clean and simple, and it functions really well. And also the comment area at the bottom is a plus because it is shared among all linguists. So it serves as a communication platform among linguists and between linguists and PMs. So for the vendor management, according to our SOW, we will need translators and proofreaders for Brazilian, Portuguese, Spanish, and French, and specialists in subtitles and DTP, and engineers that can prepare our files and set up our platforms. Since no one in our team speaks those required languages, we will need to recruit linguists. And apart from that, each member of our team wears different hats in this process. For the linguist selection, our first hunch is to go to MIS students because they mean high quality and they understand localization. The onboarding process is quite easy since SmartCat is very intuitive and translator friendly. We mainly communicated with our vendors through emails. And since we only have a small team of linguists, and thanks to the ease of use of SmartCat, we did not have a hard time in vendor management, but we do have some lessons learned. The first one is to always have backups when you're recruiting your resources. In our project, we only managed to find 3 linguists in Brazilian Portuguese and 2 linguists for other 2 languages at the beginning. And in our case, a linguist backed out in the last minute, and that has put us in a very difficult situation. So for those who wants to find volunteers in MIS, my lessons learned is to act really quick and to build good relations with your classmates from the very beginning, because they will be your best assets during this project and in the future. Generally, our client is very happy with our work, but we did make some errors like leaving a sentence in English or missing an accent. Those mistakes can be avoided if we have someone understand those languages to proofread for us after DTP. But all in all, we are very thankful to our volunteers for their dedication and hard work. Next, my colleague Alan will talk about engineer and QA part in our project.
Thanks, Jacqueline. I guess in the spirit of both learning and teaching our client how to use these different localization methods that we've been doing over the past 2 years, we kind of broke the dialogue for engineering and QA down into 4 different components. The first dialogue that we had was localizability. Basically, can we actually do this? When we look at the documents together, both client and vendor, are we actually going to be able to translate this for you? Are we actually going to be able to get it done? Are you going to need this? We also had internationalization as well, which for a long time we were discussing doing app localization for them, but basically they're so early in development, or many of these apps are so early in development that they just didn't need it. The next thing was discussing file preparation with them. So talking about how to get these files in the right format, or what we need to do to make translation easier and basically cut down on QA. And then what tools are we going to use for the actual QA process? So I'm going to talk about subtitle QA just because it was a huge component of our project, right? Basically, once we had the subtitles spotted for the first time into Brazilian Portuguese, we would reload them into Amara, and then we would actually make sure that they were playing correctly, going through everything, all the subtitle events corresponded to speaking, and then that would basically cut down on any QA that we had to do afterwards. So then we would actually take them, put them into SmartCat, and then have them translated, the SRT files. After translation, we would go through and do linguistic QA, and then have those SRT files downloaded. We'd then check them out in VLC just to make sure that they actually opened. And then we'd reload them into Amara for mechanical QA. So this is kind of what the workbench looks like. On the left-hand side, you have the Brazilian Portuguese. On the right-hand side, you have the English subtitles. And basically what you can do then is actually adjust the time frame and adjust each subtitling event to make sure that everything corresponds in length, right? So after translation, there's a chance that English can shrink or be larger than the original one, so you have to make adjustments for that, even if the timestamps are the same. This is a scoping report that kind of gets spit out by SmartCat. Initially, we had the settings way too high, so it would basically say everything was weird or wrong. There was something weird linguistically with every single segment, and this is kind of what you're looking at. And then here's the final product of the subtitles.
Olha, eu fiquei sabendo desse evento através do...
I know there was some sound there, and it's okay. Anyways, so the InDesign stuff was a little bit more straightforward. Basically, we would open the files, make sure that there weren't any images that we needed to localize or anything tricky that we were going to run into when we were actually doing the translation work. So we would take the IDML files and shoot them directly into SmartCat for translation. And we do linguistic QA afterwards. Take those IDML files and then reload them into InDesign to make sure that there wasn't anything that we needed to adjust or anything like that. So the mechanical QA would actually be done in InDesign. So here's the final product, what they kind of look like. Up in the top, you have English on the left, Spanish, French, and then Brazilian Portuguese on the far right. And now I'm going to pass it on to Ivy to talk a little bit about our exit strategy. Thanks.
Thank you, Alan. Since our client has few defined processes and only ad hoc response to business demands for international and domestic multicultural support, at the beginning of our project, we set out some goals, including help them establish basic project management processes to track cost, schedule, and functionality, help them realize how much work is actually involved in localization, and help them leverage external translation and engineering resources to support this effort. And to achieve these goals, it takes some hand-holding and continued efforts. Therefore, we have come up with an exit strategy that consists of these 4 elements, namely SmartCat TMS deployment, tutorial videos, knowledge base, and MIS resources. Since Jacqueline has covered the SmartCat part, I will focus on the other 3. Considering our client has essentially 0 experience in TMS and CAT tools, we made a series of tutorial videos on how to use SmartCat to manage their projects and workflows. Here's an example clip of our video.
These are business process management technology.
We also created a knowledge base on Google Sites, providing step-by-step instructions on different topics throughout the lifecycle of a project. There were several platforms for us to choose from for hosting our website, including Google Sites, WordPress, Wix, Nuclino, and Wiki. We compare the functionalities of each of them, whether they provide free service, no ads, customization, markup language, content structure, collaboration, and integration with other apps. Based on our priorities, we assigned these features different weights, which add up to a total score. As you can see here, Google Sites is a clear winner because of the following reasons. First, collaboration. Users can work together on a site, like editing a Google document, and you always have control over who has access. Multiple users can collaborate and share files on Google Sites, and it also allows us to hyperlink a keyword in one article to another, something like what Wikipedia does for easy navigation. Second, ease of use. It would take an average computer user 20 to 30 minutes to build a basic Google Sites website. And the system operates on what you see is what you get mode and requires no coding at all. Google Sites is also all-in-one platform, which means you get everything you need to design, publish, and administer your site under the same roof, and there's nothing to upload or install. Third, it's free, so there's no need for us to pay for hosting our website, removing the ads, plugins, or themes. Fourth, its integration with other apps. Since Google Sites is a Google product, it's tightly integrated with other Google apps, such as Google Hangouts, Google Maps, Google Drive, YouTube, and among other stuff. Here's what our knowledge base looks like. And the tutorial videos I mentioned earlier are also uploaded to this knowledge base. Last but not least, Miss Resources. By resources, I mean our Miss Professors, students, and our expertise. Like I have said, successful localization requires continued efforts. And it goes way beyond a semester or a group of students. Although with our help, they are already off to a very good start. And our client has made it very clear that they will be in constant need of the following services: translating, interpreting, app localization, localization consulting, DTP, multimedia localization, and the QA. Therefore, we will put them in contact with some of our professors, our current students, to carry on what we have started. And now I will pass the floor back to Sam.
All right, finally, we'd just like to give a big thank you and acknowledge all of the linguists who helped us out with this project, especially with the subtitling, because there was a lot more content than we originally anticipated, and they worked very hard to help us get it done. Thank you.
All right. Next up, we're going to hear from Emily, Gaia, Hiram, Olga, and Sai. Their team is called Lock and Key, and they will talk about their work with Room to Read. Take it away, guys.
Hello, everyone. We are Lock and Key. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce my team: Emily Taylor, Harim Ko, Olga Maleko, Sai Ma, and myself, Gaia Sagatelian. Our client is Room to Read, a nonprofit based in San Francisco that supports child education. Before we go into the details of our project, I'd like us all to take a step back and consider the real impact of this 4-month endeavor. Let's consider this. There are many problems in the world, and many of them can be addressed through one solution: education. Education makes people safer, healthier, and more self-sufficient. At the same time, the harsh reality is that there are over 800 million illiterate people in the world, 2/3 of whom are women and girls. This is the challenge that our client is trying to solve and the message that they're trying to communicate. So as we were reflecting on this semester-long project and the real impact of localization, we realized that it went beyond localizing words on a page, troubleshooting technical bugs, or coordinating our resources. It was about creating a human connection to help our client communicate a very important message. We are very proud of the results we've achieved during these 4 months. We brought together 41 translators based in over 10 countries, and they helped us localize into 9 locales. In total, thanks to our community, we were able to localize over 15,000 source words into these 9 locales. So as we talk about our project today, I want you to see the bigger picture. Our project was all about connecting people and across the world to help communicate our client's message, a very important message, and that is education can really change lives. So what was our mission really, and what did we accomplish in these 4 months?
Yeah, so first let's talk about our team. We don't believe in one-size-fits-all solutions. That's why we call ourselves Lock and Key. We're localization locksmiths who believe in finding the perfect solutions, which is the perfect keys to meet the unique and individual localization needs of our clients. So let's take a look at how we did this.
We connected with Room to Read when they reached out to us to localize their global monitoring report into Japanese. Room to Read publishes this report annually to give an overview of the efforts they've made and the successes they've seen in a particular year. While Room to Read has an extensive donor base in Japan, this content has never been made available to them in their native language. And we realized right away that this would be an excellent piece of marketing collateral for maintaining and expanding their donor base in Japan, so we were excited to take on this project. Here's an overview of the 2015 Global Monitoring Report we localized for Room to Read. It had 36 pages, almost 9,000 English source words, and it was created in InDesign. In this slide, you can see our localization workflow. Our first challenge was with translation. Because of the size of the document, we knew we would need to look for our volunteer Japanese translators outside of the MIS community. I reached out to a translation club I'd been a member of when I lived in Japan, and when they learned about Room to Read and the work this organization is doing for the global community, they agreed to help us. We built a team of 9 volunteer translators in Kumamoto Prefecture in Japan. We wanted to keep the editing in-house, so we reached out to Japanese translation and interpretation students here at MIS. 2 students volunteered to work together to review our translation. Next, my team carried out the desktop publishing and mechanical quality assurance steps. And finally, we had a second-year Japanese translation and interpretation student perform our linguistic quality assurance. One major challenge we faced during this project was how to manage a large group of volunteer translators working remotely. Because they were all active Facebook users, we created a private Facebook group called Room to Share. Here we shared files and divided the work. This also turned into the perfect space to manage and discuss questions of terminology and style. We were fortunate to have a glossary provided by our client, so we passed this along to our translators and editors, and we also updated it based on our terminology discussions. Another challenge we faced was our use of translation technology. Of course, as TLM students, it's second nature for us to use translation environment tools, but our volunteers in Japan wanted to work in Microsoft Word. While we did discuss training them in MemSource, we ultimately decided that we would work to accommodate our volunteers and not the other way around. So this is the workaround we came up with. After creating the project in MemSource, we imported the IDML InDesign file and exported it as a bilingual document. We hid the tags in the document and then sent it to our translators. Once they completed their individual parts, they were combined into one file. We sent that to our reviewers, and then when we got that back, we unhid all the tags, and we added tags back into the Japanese target text, and then we could re-import it back into MemSource. At that point, we were able to export the target Japanese as an IDML file, so that the Japanese text was automatically populated into InDesign. Of course, our work wasn't done there, as there would be several layout challenges waiting for us. The Global Monitoring Report is full of infographics, like the ones you see on this page. These are always a challenge to localize, and this was especially true in our case. The big blocky font here is called the Sans C4S, which, unsurprisingly, does not support Asian characters. We wanted the Global Monitoring Report to match Room to Read's other content in Japanese, so we used a font that they were using called UGothic. So the infographic turned out looking like this, but I wasn't satisfied with the way the numbers looked. I really want these statistics to pop like they do in the original. The challenge we faced was that in Japanese, you can't only have numbers. Every number has to have a counter, and the Sans C4S wouldn't support these counters. So we came up with a workaround. We changed only the numbers to the Sans C4S, and all the other characters remain in UGothic, but I made the counters a little smaller to bring more attention to the numbers. Going back to the English for comparison, I feel that while I took some liberties with the design here, this version better captures the feel of the original. Now, while we were working on localizing this Global Monitoring Report, we were also working on other projects for Room to Read.
Getting to know our client, we looked at some of their videos on YouTube, and we suggested to localize some of them by adding subtitles to the most significant ones, just like in this example on the screen.
having subtitles in different languages would expand our clients' global outreach. But there was a problem. The client no longer had access to their source video files. And in generally, they thought that it's going to be too complicated to accomplish. However, as Miss graduates, we knew something our client did not. There is Amara.org, an online subtitling tool. A YouTube video can be opened in Amara for transcription and translation, and then synced SRT file will be easily uploaded back to YouTube video. There are easy-to-follow tutorials available, which makes it possible for anyone, even without any subtitling experience, to complete the job. And the end product looks as professional as with any other subtitling tool. So while it was clear to us what tool we are going to use for this project, we were a little bit puzzled by the languages our client requested, which was German, Spanish, French, and Japanese. So none of us here speaks any German or Spanish. Thus, we decided to outsource this translation part of our project. We didn't know how to do it at first, but we had two ideas. First, we posted a call out for volunteer translators on professional websites such as Prose and Translators Cafe. We explained Room to Read's mission and what we wanted to achieve, and we asked for help. We got overwhelmed with responses. People from all over the world wanted to help. So after some careful considerations, out of few dozens of volunteers, we chose 17 professionals to work with. And to avoid being confused with so many languages and so many translators, we needed some project management tool. And the technology of our choice was this one, Google Spreadsheets. Soon, all the subtitles were translated into Spanish, Japanese, and French. And for Spanish, we even had a luxury to have 3 locales. But we still had a problem with German language. The only translator we were able to find was not very suited for this project. But this issue was successfully solved when we finally had our subtitling workshop. That was our backup plan, and it worked. Our idea was to present subtitling best practices, as well as to provide tutoring on Amara as a subtitling tool. And in return, we were hoping to get some help with our project. Our translatathon was a great success. Lots of students and even some professors showed up and participated. We got all the videos translated into German, and for that we have to thank Patricia from the first year TLM program. Already translated subtitles were reviewed and edited, and we also got some additional languages. We got Chinese, Russian, and Portuguese. So let's take a look at the results. We ended up with 10 videos subtitled with 9 locales. And overall, we localized over 40 minutes of source footage. But that was not it. We still had another project to work on for our client.
Our third project was to assist Roomtree with its gala event in Tokyo. They hold this event annually to recognize their Japanese donor base. Their gala program is localized from English into Japanese with the help of Roomtree volunteers, but they reached out to Lock & Key for Japanese to English translation, including translating some auction lots for fundraising. These translations have their own stylistic challenges, as this type of marketing text calls for transcreation as much as translation. Roomtree reported that the auctions that Lock & Key translated for them raised 1.68 million Japanese yen, or about 15,000 US dollars, a figure that will help change the lives of 336 children by giving them the lifelong gift of education. We've given an overview of 3 projects we carried out for Room to Read over this semester, But none of our efforts would have been possible without the help of our volunteer community. We had volunteers here at MISS and from around the world. And from the beginning, we knew we wanted to make it a priority to acknowledge and give back to our volunteers. One way we accomplished this was through our website. We used our website to post featured volunteer write-ups that detail the type and extent of work some of our volunteers did for us. Our hope is that these volunteers can include a link to these posts in their portfolio or their LinkedIn profile to leverage this experience for potential career prospects. Our projects also gave volunteers experience to add to their LinkedIn profiles. This is a screenshot from Kaya's LinkedIn. Kaya worked extensively with us, helping with terminology management and our linguistic quality assurance. Here, she's posted her experience with us on her LinkedIn profile with a link to her featured volunteer write-up. And, as you can see, we've also given endorsements and written recommendations for our volunteers, both here on LinkedIn and on Pros. Additionally, we asked for and received permission from Room to Read to edit the description of their YouTube videos, so that volunteers who translated or edited subtitles for their videos get credited by name. Finally, we worked with Sarah Levine, our contact at Room to Read, to record a video of her describing our projects and the positive impacts they're going to have, and thanking everyone who volunteered on the project.
We know that these efforts would not have been possible without the amazing dedication of our translator community. So on behalf of everyone at Room to Read, I would like to thank all of our volunteers. Your passion for languages is helping us to reach a wider audience and change the way we communicate our message to the world. I would like to thank the MISS Practicum team, Emily, Gaia, Irene, Olga, and Sai, for making all this possible. Thank you so much for all your hard work.
And she doesn't just thank us, she actually goes on to thank every single one of our more than 40 volunteer translators by name.
Around the world, I'd like to give you all a huge thank you. And I'd like to read a list of all the people who supported us. And for Japanese from MISS, we have Kaya, Nayoko, Mary, Shiori,
Of course, we don't want the impact of our project to end here. We will equip our client with the tools needed to build on this work for their future projects.
We wanted to leave Room to Read with more than just translated documents and subtitled videos. We also wanted to make sure that they had a localization toolkit from us so that they could continue with their localization needs in the future. So in the toolkit, we will provide a style guide as well as an updated glossary. We will also be providing them with a translation memory from the translation memory that we have in MemSource. We recognize that they do not use a CAT tool currently, but in case they decide to use one in the future, or in case they decide to work with a language service provider, they can use this translation memory instead of having to start from scratch or having to spend time and money, more time and money than needed. We also will provide them with recommended readings from sites like Multilingual Magazine or Gala, so that they can understand more about the localization process. We will also provide them with our list of volunteers, as well as the sites that we use to find the volunteers, such as pros.com, the Facebook groups, and translatorscafe.com. We will also be providing them with a scope estimate and the documentation processes that we've done in WordPress. As we were reaching out to our volunteers, we found that we needed a way to vet quality. So we created this form in Google for Room to Read to use in the future in case they would like to use the same resources and find volunteers. We also provided them with a scope estimate so that they can use this as an estimate for a ballpark figure if they decide to work with an LSP, as well as if they need to budget for translation needs. The last part of our toolkit is our documented processes. WordPress is a tool that we use to promote our practicum team, maintain a knowledge hub, and share knowledge with the wider public. This is also a resource that we will be leaving with Room to Read. To learn more, please visit our website, lockkey2017.wordpress.com. We hope that our localization toolkit offers them tips about best localization practices so that they can expand into more countries and help more children learn to read.
Finally, I want to leave you with one thought. It's no secret that education can change lives. Much like learning to read is a fundamental life skill, so is having access to information in your native language. We want to thank Room to Read for being such a wonderful nonprofit partner, all of our volunteers for making this possible, IPD advisor Scott Webb for connecting us with Room to Read, and last but not least, Max Troyer for always being there to help us with our questions. Thank you.
All right, thanks, guys. Next up, Tagarela. Emma, Lindsay, Mariana, Valeska, and Brian. And by the way, Tagarela means chatterbox in Brazilian Portuguese. They worked with Linked Learning, a Sacramento-based nonprofit focused on integrating classroom studies with practical training that is relevant to high school students' lives and future careers. Take it away.
Hello, everyone. So we are Team Tagarela. And this is the overview of our presentation. We'll first start with the project overview. The translation, talk about a little bit about the translation process, website localization, the dubbing, and some of the challenges that we faced during the project. We worked with a Sacramento-based education nonprofit that is very similar to MISS in that they focus on integrating classroom studies with more practical training. So the high school students, junior and senior year, will have internships with community members. And we were lucky to work with a client who recognized the importance of localizing to achieving their mission. So they had some Spanish content already, and our goal was to facilitate communication with non-English speaking parents and community members. And Lindsay will now tell a little bit more about the project overview.
So for this project, we had 2 target languages specified by the client, Spanish and traditional Chinese. We translated web pages from their site. We dubbed videos for them into these 2 languages. And for Chinese, we translated the fact sheets, and they had already prepared themselves a translation of the fact sheets into Spanish, which our linguists edited for them. Since we couldn't do everything, we asked them to choose 2 videos for us to dub and make a priority list of web pages that we would translate. This is our list of web pages. We had more resources for Spanish, so we were able to do more web pages. Our workflow process started with file preparation through translation, editing, and proofreading, and then to quality assurance. We used the QTranslate plugin for WordPress to localize this site. So to prepare the documents for SmartCat, we opened the web pages in WordPress, copied and pasted them into Word documents, and then uploaded the Word documents into SmartCat. We also created a term base for the translators and style guides that were based on the Microsoft style guides, but were pared down to the things that were relevant to us. We also created a translation memory using the existing translations that the company had done themselves. Then we went through translating, editing, and proofreading, in some cases, in SmartCat. Then we downloaded the documents from SmartCat, pasted the content back into WordPress under the appropriate language tab. Now Emma will talk about using Pantheon.
So Link Learning uses WordPress and Pantheon is a web development hosting platform for open source websites like WordPress and Drupal. The biggest challenge was learning Pantheon in a short amount of time, but luckily Pantheon has tutorials on the website, and we were able to figure out the workflow of Pantheon. In the screenshot, I've underlined the 3 different tabs. The red star is the development environment, the yellow is the test environment, and the green star is the live site. So the way it works is before working in the WordPress admin site, first the live site had to be cloned so that we had the most recent update of Link Learning's website. And the green circle is highlighting the WordPress admin site. And once you click that, it takes us to the WordPress admin site. And this is the WordPress admin site. So once we had access to this site, we were able to install a Translate plugin, change the settings for each language, in this case Spanish and Chinese. And here we could change and modify the content of the pages, the menu site, and also add widgets. In the screenshot, you can see that the tabs button for each language, and that allows us to add content within each page. And any changes that were made in the WordPress admin site are not automatically saved or applied, so they have to be committed to the development site or the development environment in order for the changes to be saved. In the screenshot, you can see that I circled the commit button, and above that is an entry box where I would have to note the changes that were made, and underneath that is a list of all the changes in the files that were modified on the WordPress admin site. So once all of the changes were committed, then you could visit the development site to see them applied. And this is the WordPress development site, and it allows you to view the changes that you've made like a user would, so in the user interface. This is especially useful for checking bugs, such as the one in the screenshot, which is the language picker widget that was added to the main menu. And as you can see, it overflows onto the main page's image. So once you identify bugs, you can then go back to the WordPress admin site and make any changes that are necessary, and then go through the entire process again. So speaking of quality assurance, Brian and Mariana are going to talk a little bit more about that process.
Thank you, Emma. Okay, so to explain quality assurance, I will talk about terminology management. So when we have a document to translate, we encounter many terms, acronyms, synonyms, abbreviations, and so forth. As translators and linguists, we need to keep all of the terms consistent. Terminology management helps to organize the terms to keep them consistent when translating a text. And being organized means translating and reviewing using a glossary and a style guide. A glossary will define the terms, and the style guide will have the rules and standards for the specific locale being translated. These are important when we are working on the review and translation of a document, making sure that we're delivering a high quality work. I was responsible for the Spanish quality assurance, and the first step when working on the QA was to make sure that the set terms was not to be translated. These were the terms set by the client, and what I did was to open all tasks on SmartCat and check that all of these terms was not translated, and if they were, I would replace it to the set term. So here's an example of the term linked to learning, which is the name of the client company. The left column is the source and the right column is the target. So I would make sure that linked learning was not translated on the target column. So the second step was to check inconsistencies in the text, such as double and extra spaces, links, dates and numbers, and etc. Since I'm not a native Spanish, my QA was limited to check the set terms, multiple spaces, links, making sure that the tags was not deleted or translation incorrectly. And This is an example video that I made when checking extra spaces type of error on SmartCat. Ooh. Not playing? Okay, it's not playing.
Over here, you have to click over here. Where's your mouse? There it is.
Okay. So I would check the error, and I would go directly to the segment through this Excel sheet. I would download it on SmartCat, and it takes a while to load. So I would check the extra space on the segment. So there's an extra space there at the end of the sentence. And what I would delete it and check the segment as proofread. So after I was done checking everything on SmartCat, I would download both text on Word, the original and the translation, and check the formatting and recheck inconsistencies. The translation had to match exactly the original. And here's an example of two documents, source and target. I would put them side by side and check the formatting, color of the text, and the links. The links, I would click on all the links and make sure that they would take me to the right page on both documents. And now Brianne's going to talk about Chinese quality assurance.
All right. So the first part of the Chinese quality assurance took place in SmartCat, where the translators would directly perform their translations. And the main thing was the terminology management. And for the Chinese QA, it was especially easy because the set terms that were not supposed to be translated were in English, and that everything else was in Chinese characters. So you just look into the source, and if in the source, if there were English, like linked learning, you look into the target, if they were all Chinese characters, you knew something was wrong. So that made it easier for me. And then the second thing was tag collocation. Some of our translators were familiar with tags and how they work, and some of them never heard about it before. So what I had to do was go in and look where the tags were placed and in between what vocabulary, and then put them into the target Chinese. And then after I was finished, a native speaker would check the overall quality assurance. And I also assisted with the dubbing quality assurance, and before it was very tedious process because we didn't have timestamps. We just had blank space, moments of silence in between the strings. And once we figured out that if you add timestamps, the person who's operating the dubbing software, such as Premiere, they don't need to understand the target language. They just need to recognize the timestamp and where there's sound, and the source is up top and the target is in the bottom, and they line them up. So once we added timestamps to the dubbing translations, it went a lot smoother. And we got into the Chinese linguistic quality analysis once we downloaded the files from SmartCat and uploaded them to the development site or the clone site. And once we could see it on a clone site, I lined up the clone site with the real site, and I could see where there were missing hyperlinks or missing sections. I counted the bullet points to make sure they matched. And for some reason, SmartCat, whenever you had a list of bullets, it would delete the first bullet and delete all the space, so the first bullet was connected to the last sentence. So we figured that out. And on this slide, here is an example of our files after we downloaded them from SmartCat. It seemed like the font selection, the font size, and what was bolded and what was not sometimes was selected at random. But with the development site, we were able to see what it would look like when we actually turn the files over to the client. And this is an example of where the development site saved us. We thought everything was good, but those numbers are supposed to be 1, 2, 3, and 4, but they were all 1. So we are going to put this step, make sure that it's in the exit strategy and that the client knows how to use development sites in SmartCat.
Okay, so for the dubbing part, as it was already mentioned, we had 2 videos that the client asked us to dub. Both of those videos, they were supposed to be in Chinese and English. So for them, the first part, the preparation phase, was to get the videos from, they gave us the videos, but we also knew that the videos were uploaded in YouTube. So when you go to YouTube and you click on the automatic closed captions, you're able to download it. So that's the first thing that I did. I downloaded everything. I did the corrections to actually be a transcript, a correct transcript. And with the spotting that the closed captions already give, I actually made a light spotting with just the beginning of each segment. I put everything into picture lists for both Chinese and Spanish translators, and we uploaded that to SmartCat and we sent them to the translators. So they sent us back and we did QA with that, and that was the first set of the first phase. The second phase was actually instructing those people that were not professional voiceovers to what to do to be as close to a professional as possible. So I made up a set of tips that they could follow to prepare for the actual session, the recording session, and the recording session itself. They were able to see it, to train it, and to be better prepared. Then the second phase started. For the second phase, we actually reached out for the DLC technicians. Mark Bass especially helped us a lot with Adobe Premiere. So we went there, we set up the booth, and both voiceover translators went with us and we recorded the sessions. Brian mentioned about the timestamp, and the timestamp that we used the timestamps were as simple as saying the number of the segment before start recording. So the Chinese voiceover would say 1 and then the segment in Chinese. And that was just a simple thing that really, really helped us to make the mixing sound. Then we had 2 specific challenges for those videos. The first video was an animation video, and it had its own original soundtrack in the background, as well as the original voiceover. When we started matching the recorded voiceovers, we had to mute the original voiceover, and that would make everything very artificial. So in the middle of the process, I realized that the background music was actually a sort of a canon song in loop. So I decided to play with the idea, why not to get a little bit of it, make it an infinite loop, and make our own soundtrack with the original soundtrack. So we tried it, it worked, and it was great for both voiceover recordings. So you're going to see it, I'm going to show you soon. For the second one, the challenge was, the second video, it was a video of people that had been part of the linked learn process, and the video was really fast edited, like a cutting-edge Tarantino movie. So it was difficult to actually work with languages that expanded, such as Spanish. And we decided to be bold and use something that's called the freeze frame in a video that doesn't have freeze frame. You're going to see it. So for here, you have the first one, the animation one, with the original sound. Pay attention to the original soundtrack and the voiceover. If I can make it work.
High school can be a good learning experience. But what if we could make it a great one and link high school with the rest of the world?
So this was the source, and this is the final work that we got.
好，高中是很好的学习机会。如果能够提供非常好的高中课程，并将课程与
So you can see the original soundtrack is there. And the cutting edge video that I mentioned is here.
I want to tell you about a computer engineer,
attorney, businesswoman,
graphic designer.
You can imagine, right? So this is the final result.
Quiero hablarles de un ingeniero informático, de una abogada, una mujer de negocios, un diseñador gráfico.
Challenging, right? And with that, I'll leave you to Lindsay. She's going to talk a little bit more about the challenges that we had. We already mentioned a lot of these challenges, but just to recap, with the website, we originally wanted to use the XML file from the WordPress site, but SmartCat doesn't have any filters for that, so that idea went out the window, and we ended up using the document process I talked about earlier. Also, when we were working on the website, the team at Link Learning got inspired to update their website. So midway through the translation process, we had to update the source documents to make sure that we were getting all of the new content. We also had to learn to use Pantheon, which we had never encountered before, and figure out how to add the language picker widget to the PHP, which was difficult. For translation, our biggest challenge was finding translators for traditional Chinese, and the limited number of traditional Chinese translators meant that we had to limit the amount of content we could translate. For dubbing, Valeska already mentioned the really quickly edited video was a major challenge, as well as capturing those sounds from the original animated video. Emma?
So we were, for our kickoff meeting and our celebratory lunch, we were lucky that our client was able to come and meet with us for a kickoff meeting at a local coffee shop here in Monterey. And we went over the statement of work and the quote, and we answered any questions that he had. So that's just a picture of Team Tagarela at East Village coffee shop with our client Paul. And these are pictures of our lunch. Our client wasn't able to make it, but he was still yes, he still paid for our lunch, and we use this as we took this as an opportunity to also give out certificates of appreciation to all of our linguists. And the top left picture is a picture of our linguists and the entire team, Tagarela and our linguists in the bottom picture. And that is the end.
All right, and last but not least, we've got Alex, Naomi, Amelia, Min, and Julie, who supported Naked Heart Foundation in its international outreach, helping build an inclusive society for people with special needs through play and the creation of free support services for disadvantaged families. So Locspire, take it away.
Hello, everyone. So we're Locspire, and I'll start with briefly introducing our client, Naked Heart Foundation. Naked Heart Foundation is a Russian nonprofit organization that mainly works with children with disabilities. And their main goal is to provide right support for the families of children with disabilities to ultimately reduce the child abandonment. Currently, Naked Heart Foundation is located in Russia and in London, but they're in the process of expanding their cause internationally. So the services we provided to Naked Heart Foundation are divided into 4 types. First, we did translation, editing, review, and proofreading of the promotional and marketing collaterals from Russian to English and from English to Chinese. Second, we did subtitle creation and video editing from Russian to English, and from English to Korean. Third, we did translation memory and glossary development for each language. And lastly, we also offered the website localization consulting services for them. We'll give you the processes and the challenges in more detail in the later of our presentation. So to complete our projects, we utilize various tools, and these are the ones that we used mainly. So for translation management system and to manage the translation memories, we use SmartCat and MemSource. For the subtitle creation, we used Amara. And for the project tracking and glossary development, we used Google Sheets. Next, I'll pass the floor to Alex.
Thank you, Julie. So, since it's a Russian nonprofit, I was the primary person in contact, and we reached out to different nonprofits, and that's the one that was really interested. And we worked with a SmartCat. And I see that everybody loves SmartCat. And I used to work with a company that developed SmartCat. So I'm really surprised because it's a Russian product, which is great. At least something was done in Russia, which is really quality. So, yeah, since it's a TMS, we designed it the way that every company did, I guess. We assigned a client, and we had about 12 projects in SmartCat. And for each project, we had different linguists. One of the challenges we had was because we had to translate into British English. And none of us is a British English person. Like, we don't speak British English. So we had to really had a lot of DTP and reviewing of British English, making sure that all the language is the way it should be. So here are all the projects that we had, and we decided to track also all the projects in Excel because it's the one that's independent, and in case SmartCat has some issues because it's a TMS and sometimes it just, it's on maintenance. And we decided to have access for every member and all the linguists so they could see what kind of projects we're working on, what's the deadline, and what stage it is at. And also we decided to divide them by types of projects. For example, sometimes we had DTP projects or subtitling projects, but the majority was still translation, editing, and reviewing. And we worked with Russian as a primary language, but we went from Russian into English. And that's why we involved a lot of linguists from the first year. We had 9 linguists in total, which were really great working with them. And they actually supported us a lot into the English language and reviewed a lot of projects for us. And since I'm an account manager also for Locspire, we designed a quote. And here's how our quote looks like. We got this animal as a logo. And for every project, we had a quote with all the services we provided and designed a system of payment, which was total to 0 to the client, but still helped us to figure out the scope of every project and the amount of money that could be potentially saved for the client. And yeah, so every project had a quote, and depending on the services we provided, we divided into several services. And as you can see, subtitling, engineering, testing were one of the services we provided. And now we're going to talk more in detail about the types of languages we used and the types of projects we implemented. And my colleague Mina is going to talk about Chinese.
Thank you, Alex. So I'm going to talk about the Chinese team. We have 5 teammates, 1 project managers, and 4 volunteer translators. I'm the project manager, and the 4 translators are first-year TLM students. The first thing we decided to try out a new TMS, MemSource. The reason why we choose this TMS is because it's a cloud-based tool. It's better for collaborative work like this one, and also it's cheaper for small and medium companies. Also, it has a very clear user interface for us to do the translation and tracking work. One thing that is very important for us is we want to capture, we don't want it to be a one-time translation project. We also want it to capture the client's voice, the value of Naked Heart. So before we started our translation, we asked our clients whether they have any experience with the Chinese market and whether they have done some Chinese translation before. And we found out that they have done one translation, one press release that was translated into Chinese. So we created a style guide based on the translation that's done before, and also we created a term base that so we can stick to the term base when we're doing translation in the future. Before the translation starts, we also have a kickoff meeting with our translators. So everybody has their own role. One person do the translation, one person do the editing, one person do the reviewing work, and one final person do the DTP and also in-context review. As a project manager, I'm also responsible for doing the sanity check and deliver the final project. So this is the interface, user interface of BAMSource. And this is the final project that we delivered. Amelia is going to talk about the Russian project.
So my colleague Alex and I headed the Russian team, and as he mentioned, while he dealt with account management, I acted as the senior Russian translator and editor, and we kind of both split project management roles. And we were lucky enough to have 5 talented junior translators. And as senior editor and translator, of course, I was in charge of editing all the documents from Russian into English to ensure their consistency. And of course, even though I do not speak British English, I was in charge of making sure that we still incorporated all of those elements into our translations. And while the first project I received, I actually handled it in Trados, but I quickly realized we needed a translation management system because we were getting more projects and our team was growing. So as the team grew, it especially became clear. So of course we chose SmartCat, as we mentioned, cloud-based, free, and everyone can access it whether they have a Mac or PC. So that was important to us. And also terminology was identified as a very important need, and our client was very interested in developing a multilingual glossary. And I mainly was in charge of this because as the editor, again, I saw many things that were coming up, and it was all easily fixed by creating a glossary and sharing it. And just the projects that we covered were the informational video and multiple articles. And the Russian team also enjoyed the privilege of translating public-facing documents, which covered PR events and eventually appeared on Naked Heart's website. And some of these events were the Running Hearts Green Marathon, Autism Awareness Day, London's Fabulous Fair, and the Naked Heart Forum. All in all, working with Naked Heart gave us team experience in coordinating and using a divide and conquer style strategy to help meet quality standards and deadlines. And next I'll hand it over to Naomi to talk about DTP.
Okay, now I would like to talk about one Korean project we had, and as well as some engineering and DTP work that we did. So the first challenge that I'm going to talk about is regarding the subtitling project. When we first got the project, the easiest way we could think of was to log on to the client's YouTube channel and do the subtitling from there directly. But we weren't given access when we were working on the project, so none of us really had a lot of experience with subtitling. So we just translated the source file in Word, but we later found out that if we use Amara, we can just easily sync the subtitles into the YouTube. So it worked out in the end, but we weren't quite sure what to do in the beginning, so we struggled a little bit. Secondly, it seems like everybody loves SmartCat, but we had a little problem with using SmartCat. When we were working with PowerPoint slides, we put the source file in SmartCat, but somehow it failed to extract all of the text. So when we were doing DTP work, we realized that some of the texts were left untranslated, so we had to go back to the translate and do it again. The third one is really regarding both the subtitling project and the DTP project, because I was working with a language that I do not speak, which is Russian. Since our client is based in Russia, most of our source language was Russian, and it was just difficult. For example, when I was doing the DTP work, even though we had a picture list, I had to double check and triple check to make sure that I was placing the text in the right place, because to me, the Russian alphabet all looks the same. And yeah. Okay. So now I'm going to show you some examples of what I just talked about. So here is the source PowerPoint slide. As you can see, there are some text on the pictures. Those are not part of the image. It was actually in a text box, but somehow SmartCat failed to extract it, so it wasn't translated. So I realized that, and I had to go back to the linguist and then got the translation, and this is what the final product looks like. When working with subtitling, we had, it was kind of complicated for us because, like I said, we did it both into English and Korean, but we do not have any linguists whose language combination is Russian and Korean, so we had to first do it into English, and then we had to do it from English to Korean. So after we completed our English subtitle, we downloaded the SRT file from Amara and translated into Korean. So here is what Amara interface looks like. But even when we translated from English to Korean, we had some challenges because the Korean and English, the word order is so different, and when you translate it into Korean, it shrinks a lot. So we kind of had to get a lot of help from Alex, just asking him what is being talked about in the video and if the timing looks right and stuff like that. So here is a short clip of the video that we subtitled.
Молодец, хочешь попробовать сама? Умница, потом посмотрим фильм про Наташу.
Я никогда не ожидала, что работа фонда «Обнаженные сердца» повернется таким образом, что она так повлияет на вот именно мое личное счастье, на личное счастье моей семьи. Оксана.
Okay. So after we completed all the projects, we delivered everything to the client, and we provided them with an updated TM and glossary into each of the languages that we worked in. And this is the final email from the client. I guess the client was happy with our work, and we were also very glad to work with an organization that works for such a great cause. That is it, guys. Thank you.